August 30th, 1944. Near the Meuse River, France. The sound of victory is usually loud. It sounds like artillery thunder, roaring engines, and the cheering of liberated towns. But for the U.S. Third Army, victory had suddenly become terrifyingly silent. Lieutenant Frank "Bull" Carver stood in the turret of his M4 Sherman tank, the Kentucky Derby. For 30 days, they had been the tip of the spear. They had torn through France like a chainsaw, covering 400 miles, encircling German divisions, and driving the Wehrmacht back in a panic. They were invincible. They were Patton's ghosts. But today, the Kentucky Derby was just a 30-ton paperweight. "Driver," Carver barked into his headset. "Why are we stopped? Move out." "I can't, sir." The driver's voice crackled, sounding small and scared. "Did we throw a track?" "No, sir. The engine died. We're dry. The reserve tank is empty. The jerrycans are empty. I could maybe squeeze a cup out of my Zippo lighter. But that's it." Carver looked down the column. It wasn't just him. The entire armored division, hundreds of tanks, half-tracks, and deuce-and-a-half trucks, was coasting to a halt on the side of the French country road. The low rumble of the Maybach engines faded, replaced by the chirping of crickets and the distant, ominous sound of German aircraft regrouping. Carver climbed out of the turret. He walked to the tank behind him. Then the next. Dry. Running on fumes. LT. Empty. The greatest mechanized force in history had not been stopped by Tiger tanks. It had not been stopped by minefields. It had been stopped by a fuel gauge. The War Room. August 31st, 1944. Château de Namur. Third Army HQ. General George S. Patton Jr. was vibrating with rage. He paced the opulent floor of the chateau, his riding boots clicking rhythmically like a ticking bomb. The map on the wall showed the German lines in disarray. The road to the Rhine was open. The road to Berlin was open. He could end the war by Christmas. But standing in his way was not Hitler. It was a logistics officer named Colonel Harker from SHAEF, Supreme Headquarters. "Explain it to me again," Patton whispered, his voice dangerously low. "And speak slowly, Colonel, because I am just a simple cavalryman." Colonel Harker swallowed hard. He adjusted his glasses. "General, it's the logistics. The Red Ball Express is stretched to the breaking point. We can't get fuel to everyone. General Eisenhower has made a decision." "And," Patton demanded. "The priority for fuel supplies is shifting to the north," Harker said, his voice trembling. "To General Montgomery and the 21st Army Group. They are preparing for Operation Market Garden. All available gasoline reserves are being diverted to the 1st Army to support his flank." Patton stopped pacing. The room went cold. "Montgomery?" Patton spat the name like it was poison. "You are telling me that I have to stop my tanks. Tanks that are currently staring down the throat of the Siegfried Line, so that Montgomery can drink tea and inch his way across Holland? It's a broad front strategy, General. We have to." "It's suicide," Patton roared, slamming his riding crop onto the table. "I have the Germans on the run. If I stop now, they will dig in. They will rebuild. Thousands of my boys will die because Ike wants to play nice with the British." Patton leaned over the map. He traced the line of the 1st U.S. Army, commanded by General Hodges, which was moving on his left flank. "Hodges has gas," Patton muttered. "Hodges is sitting on a fuel dump the size of Rhode Island because he's supporting Monty." Patton turned to his aide, a rugged, street-smart major named Lucas "Fixer" Kane. Kane was not a West Point man. He was a former bootlegger from Chicago who had joined the Army to avoid jail time. He knew how to move things that weren't supposed to be moved. "Major," Patton said. "Sir, get my army moving. We don't have the allocation, General." CDF cut us off. Patton smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a sheep pen. "I didn't ask for an allocation, Major. I gave you an order. If you can't get gas through the proper channels, you get it through the improper ones. I don't care if you have to suck it out of the veins of the 1st Army. Do I make myself clear?" Major Kane nodded slowly. He understood. This wasn't a military operation anymore. This was a heist. The setup. September 1st, 1944. A crossroads near Sens. Major Kane assembled his team in a bombed-out barn. They didn't look like officers. They looked like pirates. There was Sergeant Slick Kowalski, a motor pool genius who could repaint a truck in 20 minutes. There was Corporal Miller, a master forger who could replicate Eisenhower's signature with a crayon. And there were 20 drivers from the Quartermaster Corps who were tired of sitting still. "All right, listen up," Kane said, unrolling a map on a hay bale. "The Third Army is dying of thirst. If we don't get gas by tomorrow, the Germans are going to counterattack and wipe out the 4th Armored." He pointed to a red circle on the map. "This is the Chartres Depot. It's currently controlled by the U.S. First Army. According to my scouts, a convoy of 50 fuel trucks is leaving Chartres tonight, headed north to support Montgomery. 50 trucks." Kowalski whistled. "That's 100,000 gallons. That's enough to get us to the Rhine." "Exactly," Kane said. "And we're going to take it." "How?" Miller asked. "We can't just hijack American trucks. That's treason. They'll shoot us." "We aren't going to hijack them," Kane grinned. "We're going to redirect them. Miller, I need you to forge a transfer order. Priority AA1. Signed by General Bradley himself. We need uniforms, First Army patches. We're going to set up a checkpoint here at the switchback. And if they don't buy it?" Kane pulled a Thompson submachine gun from under the table. "Then we make them an offer they can't refuse. But no shooting. We need the drivers. We need the trucks. We just need to convince them that they are lost." The trap. The sun set over the French countryside. The air grew cold. At the designated crossroads, Kane and his men set the stage. They parked 2 jeeps across the road, creating a funnel. They set up MP military police signs. They swapped their Third Army Apaches for the First Army's Big A. Around midnight, the rumble began. It was a massive sound. The Red Ball Express. A convoy of GMC CCKW 2.5-ton trucks, headlights taped over to slits, rolling through the dark. They were carrying the lifeblood of the war. Kane stepped into the road, waving a red flashlight. The lead truck hissed to a halt. The driver, a tired corporal from Ohio, leaned out. "What's the hold-up, MP? We're on a schedule. This gas is for Hodges." Kane walked up to the window. He looked authoritative. He looked bored. "Roads closed, soldier," Kane said. "German sappers blew the bridge 3 miles up. Resistance activity. Closed." The driver groaned. "Command didn't say anything about a blown bridge. I have orders to go to Compiègne." "Command is in Paris drinking wine," Kane spat. "I'm here in the mud. The bridge is gone. You have to reroute." "Reroute where?" Kane handed him the forged map. "Take the South Fork. Detour through Sector 4. There's a depot near Troyes. You're ordered to offload there for temporary storage until the engineers fix the bridge." The driver squinted at the map. "Troyes? That's Third Army territory. Patton's sector." Kane stiffened. This was the moment. "Look, pal." Kane leaned in, his voice dropping. "I don't care whose sector it is. I care that there are tigers prowling these woods. You want to sit here and argue with a map? Or you want to get your convoy to safety?" The driver looked at the dark forest. He looked at Kane's confident face. He looked at the MP armband. "Troyes," the driver sighed. "All right, lead the way." Kane signaled to his men. They moved the jeeps. As the convoy rumbled past, turning south instead of north, Kane watched the taillights fade into the darkness. He picked up his radio. "Red Dog to Big Man," Kane whispered. "Go ahead." "Red Dog," Patton's voice crackled, sounding awake and alert. "The birds are flying south for the winter, General. Expect delivery by breakfast." There was a pause, then a deep, raspy chuckle. "Excellent, Major. I'll have the coffee ready. And tell the tanks. Tell them to start their engines." The heist was on. But stealing the gas was the easy part. Hiding 100,000 gallons from the rest of the U.S. Army, and the inevitable investigation was going to be the real war. September 2nd, 1944. The Third Army Sector. Dawn broke with the sweetest smell George S. Patton had ever known. It wasn't the smell of coffee or French pastries. It was the acrid, chemical stench of 80-octane gasoline being poured into thirsty engines. Major Kane's heist had been perfect. 50 trucks, 100,000 gallons. In the forest clearings, the crews of the 4th Armored Division worked in a frenzy. Jerrycans were passed down lines like buckets at a fire. The dormant Shermans coughed to life, their exhausts spitting blue smoke. The silence of the Shermans was over. The beast was awake. "Drink up, you beautiful bastards," Lieutenant Carver whispered, patting the cold steel flank of the Kentucky Derby. The fuel gauge climbed from empty to full. "We're going back to work." But while the tanks were feasting, a storm was brewing in the rear. The Hound from SHEF.
10 Uhr AM.
3rd Army HQ. The doors to Patton's chateau didn't open. They were flung wide. Colonel Sterling, an inspector general from Supreme Headquarters, SHAEF, marched in. He looked exactly like the kind of man who enjoyed auditing tax returns. He was thin, pale, and wore a uniform that had never touched mud. Behind him were 2 grim-faced MPs. "General Patton," Sterling barked, "I am placing this headquarters under investigation for grand larceny and misappropriation of strategic assets." Patton was sitting at his desk, reading a book of poetry by Kipling. He didn't look up. "Good morning, Colonel. Would you like some coffee? It's liberated German stock. Excellent quality." "I don't want coffee, General. I want my trucks." Last night, a 1st Army convoy vanished off the face of the earth. 50 trucks. Air reconnaissance shows they turned south into your sector. Patton closed the book. He stood up slowly. He was wearing his ivory-handled revolvers. He looked at Sterling with the bored expression of a lion looking at a yapping poodle.
Colonel, Patton drawled.
"My men are soldiers, not highwaymen. We don't steal trucks. We kill Germans. Perhaps the convoy got lost? It is a confusing war." "Don't play games with me, George," Sterling snapped, dropping the formalities. "General Hodges is furious. Ike is furious. Those trucks have specific serial numbers. If I find them in your motor pool, I will have your stars." "Where are they?" "The shell game." Patton smiled. He walked to the window and pointed outside. "Major Kane," Patton shouted. Major Kane jogged over from the courtyard. He looked tired but happy. "Yes, General? The colonel here thinks we stole some trucks. Show him the motor pool. Let him inspect every vehicle. We have nothing to hide, do we?" "No, sir," Kane said, his face a mask of innocence. "Right this way, Colonel." Sterling narrowed his eyes. He signaled his MPs to follow. They marched toward the massive vehicle depot behind the chateau. Sterling expected to see the stolen GMC trucks with the 1st Army markings hastily painted over. He was ready to make the arrest. But when they entered the depot, it was empty. Sterling spun around. "Where are they?" "Satellite recon saw vehicles here 3 hours ago." "Oh, those." Kane scratched his chin. "Those were medical trucks, Colonel, carrying wounded. We sent them to the rear hospitals in Paris about an hour ago." "You just missed them. Medical trucks don't carry fuel tanks." "They do when you're running low on plasma," Kane lied smoothly. "We improvise." Sterling was turning red. He knew they were lying. He could smell the fresh gasoline fumes in the air. He looked at the mud tracks. Heavy tread marks leading east, toward the front, not west toward Paris. "You didn't send them to Paris," Sterling hissed. "You drained them, and you sent the fuel to the tanks." He turned back to the chateau. "I'm going to the front. If I find a single tank moving with unauthorized fuel, I will court-martial this entire command." The race against time. Patton watched Sterling's jeep roar away toward the front lines. He picked up the phone. "Get me the 4th Armored. Tell Carver to step on it." "Step on it, sir? I want those tanks moving so fast that by the time that Colonel catches up to them, they'll be in Germany." Patton roared. "Burn the evidence, damn it. Burn it through the tailpipes." The confrontation on the road. Lieutenant Carver and the Kentucky Derby were rolling. The column was moving at top speed, 30 miles per hour, tearing up the French asphalt. The sensation of movement was intoxicating after days of sitting still. Suddenly, a jeep with a siren raced up alongside the column. Colonel Sterling stood in the passenger seat, waving his arms.
Halt!
Halt this column! Sterling screamed over the noise of the tracks. Carver looked down from the turret. He saw the angry colonel. He pressed his headset. Command, this is Derby. I have a SHAF officer trying to pull me over. Instructions? Patton's voice cut through the static. It was clear and cold. Lieutenant, do you see any enemy tanks ahead? Negative, sir. But the colonel. I didn't ask about the colonel. I asked if you see the enemy. You are an armored spearhead. You do not stop for traffic cops. You stop when you hit the Rhine River. Run him off the road if you have to. Carver grinned. He looked down at Colonel Sterling. He waved politely. Then, he ordered his driver. Speed up. Dust him. The Sherman tank roared. A massive cloud of black exhaust and dirt erupted from the tracks, engulfing Sterling's jeep. The colonel coughed, choking on the dust, as 30 tons of American steel thundered past him. The point of no return. Sterling's driver stopped the jeep. The colonel was covered in soot. He watched the endless line of tanks disappearing over the hill. He was defeated. He couldn't stop an entire armored division. The fuel was in the engines. The crime had been committed, and the evidence was being burned at 5 gallons a mile. But back at the chateau, the problem wasn't over. Major Kane walked into Patton's office. He looked pale. General, we have a problem. Did Sterling stop them? No, sir. The tanks are clear. The problem is the drivers. What drivers? The 50 drivers from the 1st Army convoy, Kane whispered. We still have them. We locked them in the wine cellar, but we can't keep them forever. When they go back to General Hodges, they're going to talk. They're going to tell him we hijacked them at gunpoint. Patton froze. He had forgotten about the human witnesses. Kidnapping 50 American soldiers was a much bigger crime than stealing gas. That wasn't just larceny. That was a court-martial offense that could end his career permanently. If Hodges finds out we held his men prisoner, Patton muttered, Eisenhower will send me home in disgrace. He stood up and walked to the window. He looked at the wine cellar doors. Major, Patton said softly, I need you to fix this. I need those men to go back to Hodges and tell him they got lost. I need them to believe it. How do we do that, General? Jedi mind tricks. Patton turned, his eyes twinkling with a dangerous idea. No, Patton said. Bribery, but not with money. Every soldier has a price, Major. Find out what these men want more than anything in the world. They're truck drivers, General. They want to go home. I can't give them home, Patton grinned, but I can give them the next best thing. Open the reserve stores, break out the captured cognac, and get the medals ready. Medals, sir? We're going to turn those prisoners into heroes, Major. By the time they leave here, they won't want to testify against us. They'll want to join us. September 2nd, 1944. The wine cellar. The 50 drivers from the 1st Army were not happy. They were sitting on crates of vintage French wine, hungry, tired, and convinced they were going to be court-martialed for losing their trucks. This is kidnapping, one sergeant grumbled. When I get back to HQ, I'm filing a report. That major with the MP armband is going to Leavenworth. Suddenly, the cellar doors creaked open. Light flooded the damp room, but it wasn't the major. It was General Patton. He walked down the stone stairs, his medals clinking softly. He was followed by aides carrying trays of steaming steak, roasted potatoes, and, most importantly, open bottles of the best cognac in France. The room went dead silent. The drivers scrambled to stand at attention. At ease, Patton rumbled. He grabbed a bottle of wine, pulled the cork with his teeth, and spat it onto the floor. Men, Patton began, looking at them with intense admiration. I owe you an apology. My staff tells me there was a navigational error. You were supposed to go north to General Hodges. Instead, you came south to the fighting. He paused, letting the words sink in. But let me tell you something. General Hodges is currently sitting in a tent eating K-rations. Up here, we are killing Nazis. And because of the fuel you delivered, the 4th Armored Division is currently smashing the Siegfried Line. He walked up to the angry sergeant. Patton pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. What is your name, son? Sergeant Miller, sir. 1st Transport Company. Well, Sergeant Miller, Patton said, opening the box to reveal a bronze star. I am attaching a commendation to your file for initiative under fire. You saw that the Third Army was in distress, and you made a command decision to divert critical supplies to the point of impact. Miller blinked. I did, sir. You did? Patton smiled. Unless, of course, you want to go back and tell General Hodges you were tricked by a couple of guys in a jeep. That sounds like a court-martial for incompetence. But this, Patton tapped the metal. This sounds like heroism. Patton turned to the room. I have ordered my staff to load your empty trucks with souvenirs. German helmets, Luger pistols, flags. Every man here goes back a hero. You didn't get lost, gentlemen. You were the lost convoy that saved the offensive. Patton raised the bottle. So what's it going to be? Are you victims? Or are you the Third Army's favorite sons? Sergeant Miller looked at the medal. He looked at the stake. He looked at the Luger pistol poking out of a crate in the corner. He grabbed a glass. To the Third Army, General. The Return of the Jedi. September 3rd, 1944. 1st Army HQ. Colonel Sterling was waiting at the depot when the stolen convoy finally returned. He had his notebook ready. He was ready to take statements, arrest Major Kane, and bury Patton. The trucks rolled in. But something was wrong. The drivers weren't hanging their heads. They were honking their horns. They had German iron crosses pinned to their grills. The drivers were wearing fresh uniforms and smoking expensive cigars. Sterling ran up to Sergeant Miller's truck. Sergeant, report. You were hijacked, correct? I need a statement confirming that the Third Army forced you off the road. Miller leaned out of the cab. He was twirling a German officer's dagger in his fingers.
Hijacked, Colonel?
No, sir. We were commandeered. Tactical emergency. General Patton needed us. We rode with the tanks, sir. Hell of a fight. But the orders. Sterling sputtered. You were supposed to go to Montgomery. Navigational hazard, sir. Miller shrugged. Bridge was out. Had to detour. But don't worry, Colonel. General Patton sent a gift for General Hodges. Miller pointed to the back of the truck. Sterling looked. It wasn't empty. It was filled with cases of champagne and a captured Mercedes-Benz staff car with a bow on it. A note was attached to the steering wheel in Patton's handwriting. Hodges, thanks for the loan. The gas was delicious. Here is a car for your trouble. George. Sterling dropped his notebook. He knew he had lost. There would be no investigation. You can't court-martial heroes and you can't audit a victory. The breakthrough. September 5th, 1944. The Moselle River. Because of the stolen gas, the 4th Armored Division didn't stop. They crossed the Moselle River before the Germans could blow the bridges. They encircled Nancy. They destroyed the 5th Panzer Army. Lieutenant Carver and the Kentucky Derby sat on a ridge overlooking the burning German fortifications. The tank was low on gas again. Sir, the driver called out. Needle is touching red. We need to stop. Carver laughed. He keyed his radio. Major Kane? We're dry again. Back at HQ, Major Kane was looking at a map. He saw a British supply train moving slowly through Belgium, carrying thousands of gallons of diesel. Don't worry, Lieutenant, Kane grinned. I think I see another navigational error coming up. The legacy. General Patton was never officially reprimanded for the great gasoline heist. General Eisenhower knew about it. General Bradley knew about it. Even Montgomery suspected it. But in the history books, the liberation of France is often attributed to superior logistics. Years later, in a bar in Ohio, an old Sergeant Miller would tell the story to anyone who would listen. Did you really meet Patton? A young soldier asked him. Met him. Miller smiled. touching the faded bronze star on his lapel. Kid, I bought him a drink. Best damn gas station attendant I ever met. The end.